Long before history was written and kingdoms rose upon the earth, whispers spoke of beings who walked among men, mighty ones whose presence shaped the destiny of the world. These were the Nephilim, the mysterious offspring of divine entities and human women, whose story lies hidden within the sacred lines of Genesis 6:1-4. Ancient texts describe them as men of renown, giants of immense strength and intellect, feared by all who beheld them. Yet through the ages, their memory has been buried beneath layers of skepticism, censorship, and theological discomfort. Their existence challenges both science and faith, and that is precisely why their story was silenced. Echoes of these forgotten giants still resonate across ancient myths and legends. Civilizations that never met, Sumerian, Greek, Mayan, and Hebrew, all tell tales of celestial beings descending to the earth, teaching forbidden wisdom and fathering powerful offspring. They were remembered as gods, demigods, or titans, yet all descriptions align with one truth. These were not mere men. Something otherworldly once walked the soil of this planet. Each myth, each scripture, and each ruin tells a fragment of a larger picture, a story that has been deliberately veiled to protect humanity from confronting what it cannot easily explain. Historians and theologians often avoid discussing this subject, labeling it allegory or myth. Yet one cannot dismiss the unity of these accounts, written in different languages, on different continents, across thousands of years. The presence of the Nephilim represents a turning point in creation itself, where heaven's order was violated and the natural and divine realms intertwined. Their story is not just about giants. It is about knowledge that was forbidden, boundaries that were crossed, and consequences that reshaped the world. Throughout generations, powerful institutions have buried traces of this truth, fearing what it might reveal about humanity's true origins. Ancient artifacts vanish, texts are reinterpreted, and archaeological findings contradicting accepted timelines are quietly forgotten. Yet truth has a way of enduring. Every suppressed document, every sealed cave, every strange legend passed down through centuries becomes a clue, a quiet testimony that the past is not as simple as we have been taught. Those who seek, who listen closely to the whispers of forgotten ages, begin to recognize that the story of the Nephilim is not dead, it is waiting to be rediscovered. This journey into the mystery of the Nephilim is not for the faint of heart. It challenges the boundaries of belief and invites reflection on humanity's connection to the divine. It asks questions few dare to voice. Who were these beings really? Why did they appear? And why was their story erased from history? The answers may not fit comfortably within the world's established narratives, but they may hold the key to understanding who we truly are and what forces continue to shape our destiny even now. If you are drawn to uncovering the secrets hidden beneath the surface of ancient texts and forgotten civilizations, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the coming revelations about the Nephilim and other mysteries long buried in the shadows of history. Like this video to help share these truths with others who are ready to see beyond the ordinary, and leave a comment with your thoughts, because every shared voice brings us one step closer to rediscovering what the world tried to forget. Before the world drowned beneath the rising waters, the earth was a place of extraordinary wonder and corruption. Humanity had multiplied, spreading across fertile plains and high mountains, mastering tools, art, and knowledge that defy what later generations would believe possible. Ancient texts hint that people of that age lived far longer, reaching lifespans measured in centuries rather than decades. Wisdom accumulated across ages, and technology, though lost to our modern eyes, flourished in ways that blended the spiritual with the material. Cities of stone and light, sacred gardens, and towers that reached toward the heavens were said to adorn the ancient landscape. Yet beneath the surface of this beauty, a shadow was forming, a corruption born of pride, curiosity, and rebellion. Those who walked the earth before the flood were not like the fragile humans of later times. They possessed knowledge directly inherited from divine sources, passed down through generations that still remembered creation's pure harmony. Over time, however, as these memories faded and human ambition grew, desire for power overtook devotion to the Creator. Knowledge became weaponized, and the balance between heaven and earth fractured. The Book of Genesis records that human wickedness became great, and every imagination of the thoughts of their heart was only evil continually. The world had grown advanced, yet spiritually hollow, a mirror of what happens when wisdom is severed from divine guidance. Legends from Mesopotamia and Sumer echoed the same warnings. They speak of a time when celestial beings descended to mingle among men, teaching them secrets not meant for mortal hands. Metalworking, enchantments, and arts of war entered the world, reshaping civilizations and twisting the order that had been established. Humanity was lured into prideful creations that rivaled the works of heaven, and violence began to spread across the earth. Each city sought dominion, each ruler proclaimed himself divine, and bloodshed became as common as the morning dew. The world was growing heavy with sin, and the heavens watched in sorrow. Amid this chaos, giants walked openly among men. These beings, known as the Nephilim, were said to be the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, towering figures of immense power. They ruled with iron fists and demanded worship, turning humanity into slaves of fear. The apocryphal Book of Enoch describes them consuming the fruits of human labor until the earth itself cried out. These giants corrupted the land, devouring life and defiling what was sacred. Their rule marked a time when the divine boundary between heaven and earth had been fully broken. Violence spread like disease, and even the elements reflected the moral decay of creation. Rivers overflowed, storms grew unpredictable, and the stars seemed dimmer. Humanity had lost touch with its spiritual essence, blinded by pride and fascination with forbidden power. Prophets warned that divine judgment was near, yet their voices were drowned by laughter and arrogance. People celebrated their inventions, their architecture, their idols, convinced that nothing could destroy their achievements. They did not know that the same knowledge which built their towers would soon summon their downfall. Among the masses, only a few retained purity of heart. One man named Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, for he had not been corrupted by the bloodlines or teachings that infected his generation. While the rest of the world feasted in decadence, he quietly followed the divine instructions given to him, constructing a vessel of salvation while his neighbors mocked him. To them, the idea of judgment was absurd, yet behind the veil of heaven, justice was already being set in motion. When the skies finally opened and the fountains of the deep burst forth, it was not only a flood of water, but a cleansing of creation itself. The age of giants ended beneath the roar of rain and the collapse of mountains. What had been glorious cities turned to dust, and the knowledge that once dazzled humanity was buried under layers of mud and silence. The flood did not merely erase civilization, it washed away the record of an era when divine beings and humans had walked side by side. The silence that followed was not accidental, it was divine design. Memories of that ancient world survived only in fragments, hidden within myths and oral traditions. Each culture remembered in its own way. Tales of gods punished for mixing with mortals, stories of titans drowned in wrath, and ancient rulers who defied heaven and paid the price. These remnants are the faint echoes of that forgotten epoch. The flood was not only an end, it was a reset, a veil drawn over a story too dangerous for unguarded minds. Humanity was given a second beginning, yet traces of that first world still linger in our collective memory, waiting to be rediscovered. Mystery surrounds the brief yet powerful passage in Genesis that speaks of the sons of God taking wives from the daughters of men. The simplicity of the words hides a depth of meaning that has stirred debate for centuries. Were these sons divine messengers? Celestial beings drawn to the beauty of human women, or were they powerful rulers of ancient lineages claiming divine status? The ambiguity has fueled countless interpretations, but the oldest traditions, preserved in texts like the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, insist that these were heavenly beings who crossed a forbidden line. Ancient Hebrew thought often referred to the sons of God as angelic entities, part of the divine council. They were not bound by flesh, yet they were capable of manifestation within the physical world. Curiosity and desire led some of them to gaze upon humanity with fascination. They saw the daughters of men, radiant and alive, and chose to descend to the earth, forsaking their divine order. This act of union, unnatural and forbidden, resulted in offspring that were neither fully divine nor entirely human. The birth of the Nephilim marked a fracture in the natural order, a disruption that sent ripples through creation itself. These unions did more than produce physical giants. They altered the spiritual fabric of humanity, mingling divine energy with mortal imperfection. The resulting beings were mighty in strength and intellect, but devoid of humility or compassion. They inherited the pride of their celestial fathers and the desires of their human mothers. The world fell under their influence, and humanity became subject to rulers who viewed themselves as gods. Their arrogance reflected the very rebellion that had caused the downfall of their fathers in heaven. Records found among the Dead Sea Scrolls provide glimpses of this cosmic transgression. They describe how the Watchers, those who descended from the heavens, taught their human partners knowledge of enchantments, astrology, weapon crafting, and the manipulation of natural forces. What was once pure became contaminated by ambition. Mankind learned secrets that led to the creation of war, vanity, and deception. Light that had once illuminated the world was twisted into a tool of domination. The daughters of men, once symbols of beauty and creation, became vessels for a corrupted bloodline that would echo through generations. Ancient civilizations carried the memory of these events in their myths. The Greeks spoke of gods descending to mate with mortals, producing heroes of extraordinary might. The Sumerians told of Anunnaki, who governed from the heavens and gave birth to half-divine kings. The common thread across these stories suggests a shared memory, a recognition that something profound once occurred between the realms of spirit and flesh. What religion later labeled as myth may have originated in truth too dangerous for later ages to confront. The union between heaven and earth did not go unnoticed by the Creator. Divine order had been disrupted, and balance demanded restoration. The children of these unions became destructive forces, their existence an affront to the sanctity of creation. The Book of Enoch recounts how the archangels were sent to restrain the Watchers, binding them in the depths until the day of judgment. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were condemned to destruction, yet their spirits, unfit for either heaven or earth, became restless, wandering across ages as unseen influences over humanity. Interpretations of these events vary among scholars and theologians, yet the consistency across ancient writings remains striking. Every culture that preserved fragments of the tale understood it as a warning about boundaries, corruption, and forbidden knowledge. The story of the sons of God and the daughters of men is not merely an account of celestial desire. It is a reflection of humanity's recurring temptation to overreach, to seek divine power without divine wisdom. The consequences of that rebellion still echo through time, shaping humanity's unending struggle between enlightenment and downfall. Legends of enormous beings fill the lore of every continent, yet their physical evidence has always been met with silence or dismissal. The Bible records them as men of renown, warriors of ancient days, whose power and stature struck fear across nations. Archaeological reports from the past 2 centuries have described skeletal remains of immense size, skulls with elongated jaws, femurs larger than a man's arm, and graves that defy conventional anthropology. Many of these findings quietly disappeared, sealed in vaults or dismissed as hoaxes, yet the consistency of these accounts across the world demands attention. Across the ancient land of Bashan, stories linger of King Og, whose bed was said to measure over 13 feet in length. Scriptures mention him as one of the last of the Rephaim, descendants of the same lineage that once filled the pre-flood world. Ruins in that region, built with massive basalt stones, suggest architectural techniques far beyond the capability of ordinary humans. The stones themselves weigh hundreds of tons, aligned with precision impossible for primitive tools. What kind of beings could have raised such monuments, and for what purpose? North America's ancient mounds tell a similar tale. Early explorers unearthed remains of gigantic figures buried in ceremonial formations, often accompanied by artifacts of remarkable craftsmanship. Reports published in the 19th century describe skeletons measuring over 8 feet, sometimes 10. Yet as quickly as they surfaced, these discoveries vanished from official record. Institutions labeled them as errors, mismeasurements, or folklore. The question remains why so many identical reports, written decades apart, would describe the same phenomenon if nothing had existed at all. The megalithic sites of Peru, Egypt, and Lebanon further blur the boundary between myth and evidence. Enormous stone blocks fitted with surgical precision, lifted and transported across impossible distances, continue to puzzle engineers. Legends surrounding these places speak of gods and giants shaping the world. The idea that mere human hands accomplished such feats underestimates what the ancients consistently attributed to a race of powerful beings who once walked among them. Many ancient languages preserve terms connected to giants: Nephilim, Rephaim, Anakim, Titans, and others. Each name carries the same essence: a reference to beings taller, stronger, and wiser than ordinary men. Their presence shaped early human religion, inspiring both reverence and terror. In many stories, they demanded offerings, established dynasties, and waged wars that shattered continents. Over time, as they faded from the earth, humans turned their memory into legend, masking divine rebellion under the veil of mythology. Accounts of suppressed discoveries continue to surface. Researchers have claimed that skeletons unearthed in India, South America, and the Middle East were removed by organizations seeking to maintain a uniform narrative of human evolution. Museums quietly reassigned anomalous artifacts, while academic circles dismissed anything that contradicted established timelines. The fear of rewriting history has often outweighed the pursuit of truth. If the existence of giants were accepted, humanity would be forced to acknowledge a time when divine and mortal bloodlines coexisted. The land of Canaan itself was described as inhabited by giants long after the flood. When the Israelite spies entered the region, they declared that they saw the sons of Anak, descendants of the Nephilim, and compared themselves as grasshoppers before them. Such language suggests more than poetic exaggeration. It reflects a collective memory of immense beings whose physical dominance and spiritual corruption once defined civilizations. Ruins scattered across continents whisper the same question: who built the massive foundations beneath our oldest temples? Who taught ancient architects to move stones heavier than any modern crane can lift? Who ruled over the early world with knowledge so advanced it seemed divine? Whether in the deserts of Bashan or the highlands of Peru, the clues remain, waiting for open minds to connect them. The story of the Nephilim is not confined to myth. It is embedded in the very stones of the earth, in the monuments of our ancestors, and in the fragments of evidence that powerful voices have long tried to bury. Long before the flood erased the ancient world, Celestial beings known as the Watchers descended from their divine dwelling places. Their story is scattered throughout apocryphal texts, particularly within the Book of Enoch, which describes how these beings swore an oath upon Mount Hermon to abandon their heavenly stations and dwell among humankind. Their descent was not sanctioned by the Creator. It was an act of defiance, an assertion of free will against divine law. They came to teach, to guide, and to share what was forbidden, knowledge that was never meant to be wielded by mortal hands. When these Watchers arrived, they appeared as beings of light and power, admired by early humans who mistook their brilliance for holiness. They instructed men in the forging of metal, the crafting of weapons, and the construction of fortified cities. Women were taught enchantments, cosmetics, and arts of seduction. Astronomy, the movement of stars, and the calculation of seasons, secrets that belonged to the heavens, were given freely. Each gift was a thread unraveling the order of creation. What began as enlightenment soon turned to exploitation. Humanity's innocence faded, replaced by greed, violence, and obsession with control. Records from Mesopotamia and Babylon mirror these accounts. Ancient tablets describe divine beings who descended to instruct humanity in mathematics, architecture, and celestial observation. The Sumerians called them Anunnaki, beings who gifted civilization to mankind. Yet the underlying tone of these records suggests that these teachings came with a price. As human knowledge expanded, reverence for the Creator diminished. Pride took root, and societies began to worship their celestial instructors instead of the source that made them all. Under the influence of the Watchers, humanity crossed thresholds never meant to be passed. Metallurgy birthed weapons, enchantments replaced prayer, and the balance between the natural and spiritual realms fractured. What was taught as knowledge became a curse that turned creation against itself. The Watchers' presence altered everything, including the spiritual fabric of the world. They corrupted human hearts, and through their unions with women, they altered even the physical nature of humanity's descendants. Giants emerged, symbols of human and celestial arrogance combined. Enoch's writings speak of his divine commission to warn the Watchers of their coming judgment. He was shown visions of their fate, how they would be bound in the depths of the earth until the final reckoning. Their knowledge, once radiant, was now deemed profane. The very wisdom that could have elevated mankind instead became the source of its destruction. What was meant for creation had been twisted into domination. It is said their written records were hidden, sealed away so that future generations would not stumble upon the same forbidden paths. Ancient scrolls suggest that fragments of this celestial knowledge survived the flood, carried in secret by those who remembered the Watchers' teachings. After the deluge, similar knowledge resurfaced mysteriously across distant cultures that should have had no contact with each other. Astronomical alignments in pyramids, complex calendars, and symbolic rituals all hint at a shared legacy, a legacy born of heavenly rebellion. The continuity of such advanced understanding across continents implies that the Watchers' influence endured, hidden beneath the appearance of myth and legend. Priests and mystics in later ages sought these remnants, attempting to decipher the power left behind. Ancient Egypt, Babylon, and even early Israel carried traces of this forbidden wisdom. It was passed down in secret societies, embedded in symbols and rituals, disguised as sacred mysteries. Those who possessed fragments of it became kings, magicians, and scholars whose knowledge seemed supernatural. Yet each civilization that embraced it eventually collapsed, consumed by its own corruption. Echoes of the Watchers still ripple through modern culture. Their names appear under different guises, in mythology, in occult traditions, and in coded references within esoteric writings. The idea of beings who defied heaven to enlighten humanity persists because it reflects a universal truth. Knowledge without humility leads to ruin. The Watcher's story serves as a warning carved into the foundation of civilization itself. Their hidden records are not merely texts or artifacts. They are reminders of how easily light can turn to shadow when wisdom is severed from reverence. Ruins scattered across the globe whisper of an age when colossal beings shaped the earth with impossible precision. Temples carved into mountain faces, megalithic walls fitted with mathematical perfection, and cities aligned with celestial constellations point to builders whose knowledge surpassed their supposed era. Across continents divided by oceans, ancient cultures recorded encounters with beings of immense stature and power. Whether known as Titans, Anunnaki, or Nephilim, their imprints remain etched into stone, architecture, and myth. Sumerian inscriptions describe rulers who reigned for thousands of years, their authority derived from divine ancestry. These kings claimed descent from heavenly beings who governed before the flood, establishing dynasties that later civilizations would imitate. Statues of giants and hybrid creatures line the temples of Mesopotamia, their forms reflecting the fusion of human and divine traits. Each monument tells a silent story of a forgotten age when gods and mortals shared the same world. In Egypt, massive stone blocks were laid with accuracy that modern engineers struggled to replicate. The Great Pyramid's alignment with true north, its geometric perfection, and the astronomical significance of its passages suggest knowledge of a cosmic order that few understood. Hieroglyphs recount gods descending from the sky, bringing wisdom and structure to chaos. Though scholars attribute these feats to human ingenuity, the scale and precision hint at something more, a collaboration between humanity and beings who possessed capabilities beyond the mortal realm. Legends from the Andes describe Viracocha, a bearded god who emerged from the waters after a great catastrophe and instructed survivors in building cities and temples. Structures in Peru, such as Sacsayhuaman, bear stones weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together without mortar and able to withstand earthquakes that destroy modern constructions. Local oral traditions speak of the Tall Ones, teachers from the sky who guided their ancestors. These narratives mirror those of Mesopotamia and Egypt, suggesting a shared remembrance of ancient contact with powerful beings. Mesoamerican cultures carried similar memories. The Mayans recorded that their gods descended to earth and imparted calendars, mathematics, and the art of prophecy. Their temples echo the same star alignments found in the Old World, pointing to a cosmic knowledge too advanced to be coincidental. Their myths speak of earlier epochs destroyed by divine judgment, where giants ruled before being swept away by floods and fire. Each legend carries a piece of a global puzzle pointing toward a common truth buried under centuries of disbelief. Across the Mediterranean, Greek mythology recounted the reign of the Titans, gigantic beings born of divine lineage who challenged the Olympian gods. Their wars reshaped the earth, and their imprisonment beneath mountains symbolized the subjugation of ancient powers. Yet beneath the poetic veneer, these tales resemble the same story told by Genesis and Enoch. Beings of celestial origin defied heaven, mingled with mortals, and brought destruction upon the world. Different names, same memory. Even in remote Pacific islands, oral histories speak of builders so large they could move boulders as if they were pebbles. The massive stone heads of Easter Island stand as sentinels to a lost knowledge, their purpose still debated. Indigenous tribes of North America tell of a race of red-haired giants who once dominated the land before vanishing in a great cataclysm. These traditions arose independently, yet all converge on the same theme. Giants once walked among humans, shaping the earliest civilizations. The possibility that these beings were remnants or descendants of the Nephilim cannot be dismissed easily. The alignment of myths, archaeological enigmas, and ancient texts suggests that humanity's early achievements were influenced by powers long forgotten. Over time, what began as reverence turned into worship, then myth, As generations passed, memory blurred, and the story of the Nephilim became allegory, yet their fingerprints remain on every continent, carved into stone, encoded in language, and preserved in the collective soul of humankind. Reluctance to acknowledge these connections stems from fear that human history is not solely human. Accepting that ancient civilizations received instruction from divine or hybrid beings would challenge the foundation of modern understanding. It would demand the rewriting of history and theology alike. Yet the stones themselves remain unmoved, testifying silently to an age when giants left their footprints upon the earth and humanity stood in their shadow. When early scholars began translating sacred texts, traces of the Nephilim narrative were present but unsettling. Descriptions of divine beings descending to earth and mingling with humanity conflicted with later doctrines that sought to maintain a strict divide between heaven and mortal creation. Over time, references to the Nephilim were softened, allegorized, or removed entirely. The early church, seeking unity and control, deemed such interpretations dangerous. Knowledge that threatened theological simplicity was quietly buried beneath commentary and revision. As centuries passed, libraries that once housed writings about the Watchers and their offspring were destroyed or suppressed. The Council of Laodicea and later ecumenical gatherings determined which texts were acceptable for doctrine and which were to be excluded. Books like Enoch and Jubilees, which spoke openly about celestial rebellion and hybrid offspring, were labeled heretical. By silencing these records, religious authorities shaped a narrative that presented humanity as isolated from otherworldly interference, safe within divine order. Yet fragments of forbidden knowledge continued to surface among mystics, scholars, and explorers who dared to look beyond the official line. Institutions of learning later followed a similar pattern. As modern science rose to prominence, any evidence suggesting non-human intervention in early civilization was dismissed as superstition. Archaeological findings that contradicted the accepted model of human evolution were ridiculed or concealed. Reports of giant skeletons unearthed in the 19th century were confiscated by powerful institutions, often never seen again. When curiosity threatened consensus, silence became the weapon of preservation. Motives for this suppression ran deeper than fear of disbelief. Acknowledging that beings of immense power once interacted with humanity would unravel the accepted timeline of civilization and expose uncomfortable truths about spiritual realities. Such revelations would blur the boundary between myth and fact, shaking both religious and scientific authority. Maintaining order required ignorance. The story of the Nephilim became a relic of folklore, relegated to the margins of pseudoscience, even as archaeological anomalies continued to accumulate. Throughout the Renaissance, secret societies emerged, claiming possession of ancient wisdom. Their symbols, often derived from pre-flood traditions, hinted at an inheritance older than recorded history. Alchemical diagrams, astrological maps, and architectural blueprints reflected fragments of Watcher knowledge preserved in secrecy. These groups understood that the official narrative of human progress was incomplete. Yet their secrecy further fueled suspicion, allowing mainstream institutions to dismiss them as mystics or conspirators while quietly drawing from their discoveries. The great universities of Europe standardized education around rigid frameworks that excluded spiritual dimensions of knowledge. History became measured by material evidence alone, leaving no room for accounts that blended the divine and physical. Scholars who suggested otherwise faced ridicule or professional ruin. The wall between faith and science grew thicker, and with it, the collective amnesia regarding the Nephilim deepened. Humanity forgot that its past was shared with beings who once shaped its destiny. Whispers of lost records occasionally surfaced, ancient manuscripts hidden beneath monasteries, fragments of scrolls unearthed in desert caves. The Dead Sea Scrolls reignited debate, revealing texts that echoed Enoch's writings and described the Watcher's rebellion in vivid detail. Yet even then, portions remained withheld from public release, controlled by committees that determined what was suitable for dissemination. Every discovery seemed to confirm what had long been denied, and yet full disclosure never arrived. Motivations for concealing these truths may stem from more than institutional control. The Nephilim story reveals humanity's vulnerability to influence from realms beyond its comprehension. Accepting that such influence once existed implies that it could return. Fear of destabilizing belief systems, both spiritual and scientific, ensures that silence remains the preferred response. Yet beneath that silence lies an unbroken thread connecting ancient rebellion to modern mystery. Evidence continues to surface despite efforts to suppress it. Carvings, texts, and monuments defy conventional explanation, speaking of giants, celestial teachers, and catastrophic judgment. The more researchers uncover, the clearer it becomes that humanity's early history was far more complex than textbooks suggest. The cover-up persists not merely out of ignorance, but out of a collective refusal to face the magnitude of what once occurred. Those who control history also control the limits of imagination, and within those limits, the story of the Nephilim remains hidden, waiting for those willing to look beyond what has been allowed to be seen. Centuries after the floodwaters receded and the memory of the giants faded into legend, the possibility that remnants of their bloodline survived continues to intrigue researchers and believers alike. Reports of extraordinary human height, genetic anomalies, and archaeological discoveries suggesting non-human traits have reignited interest in the Nephilim's enduring influence. Across remote valleys and forgotten burial sites, bones with proportions beyond human norms have been uncovered only to vanish into private collections or institutional vaults. Each disappearance deepens suspicion that the truth about humanity's hybrid origins is being carefully hidden from public view. Strange patterns within human DNA have drawn the attention of geneticists, puzzled by sequences that appear out of place, almost as though introduced from an external source. Certain lineages across the globe exhibit genetic markers with no identifiable ancestral link, sparking debate about whether these fragments are remnants of an ancient race. Tales of royal families guarding divine heritage and secret orders tracing their bloodlines to ancient gods may reflect distorted memories of an old truth. The idea that traces of celestial ancestry persist quietly within human veins. Gigantism, though medically explained today through hormonal imbalance, carries echoes of something far older. Legends of towering figures living among isolated tribes, coupled with unexplained skeletal finds, suggest that the Nephilim gene may not have been fully erased. Accounts from explorers in the Amazon and Central Asia describe encounters with unusually large humanoid beings whose physical capabilities surpassed ordinary men. While such stories are dismissed by modern science as folklore, the repetition of identical descriptions across distant cultures indicates more than coincidence. Certain secret societies, obsessed with blood purity and divine heritage, have guarded these genetic secrets for generations. Rituals surrounding initiation and lineage preservation may stem from ancient attempts to retain the power of the Watcher's offspring. References within occult texts to awakened blood and sleeping giants symbolize the idea that dormant traits from celestial union still rest within humanity, waiting to be reactivated. Whether interpreted metaphorically or biologically, the persistence of this idea throughout history reveals an undercurrent of fascination with divine ancestry. Modern archaeology occasionally unearths artifacts whose size and precision defy explanation. Oversized weapons, tools, and burial chambers suggest users of immense stature. In regions of Sardinia, Afghanistan, and the American Midwest, Reports of large skeletons unearthed from mounds or caves continue to emerge. Witnesses recount bones measuring twice the length of ordinary remains, skulls with double rows of teeth, and artifacts scaled to match. Photographs and testimonies surface briefly, then vanish as swiftly as they appear, leaving behind whispers of suppressed discoveries and institutional interference. Advances in genetic engineering have revived ancient fears about tampering with creation. As scientists experiment with hybrid organisms, the parallels to the forbidden unions of Genesis become impossible to ignore. Efforts to merge human and animal DNA or to enhance genetic capability beyond natural limits echo the rebellion of the Watchers who sought to improve humanity according to their own vision. The line between progress and defiance grows thinner with each passing decade, as knowledge once labeled divine trespass becomes celebrated innovation. Unexplained phenomena in modern times further suggest that the Nephilim legacy may extend beyond physical traits. Accounts of supernatural encounters, abductions, and entities claiming celestial origins mirror the ancient narrative of beings descending from the heavens to manipulate humanity. Whether interpreted as spiritual deception, interdimensional activity, or genetic memory resurfacing, these experiences point toward a continuing connection between mankind and forces beyond comprehension. Certain researchers propose that the Nephilim spirit persists through ideology rather than biology. The pursuit of ultimate power, the hunger for immortality, and the relentless desire to transcend human limits all reflect the same ancient impulse that corrupted the pre-flood world. Technology, politics, and even modern spirituality bear the imprint of this ambition. Humanity once again reaches toward the divine without reverence, driven by pride to become its own god. The cycle repeats, and the echoes of the Nephilim reverberate through the modern age. Bloodlines traced through ancient dynasties, secret archives, and modern genetics suggest that humanity may carry more than physical heritage from the past. It carries spiritual resonance. Whether these echoes manifest as genius, corruption, or defiance depends on the choices made by each generation. Across centuries of silence and skepticism, one truth continues to emerge. The story of the Nephilim did not end with their destruction. Though their bodies perished in the flood, their spirits were condemned to wander the earth, severed from heaven and denied rest. Ancient writings call them evil spirits or unclean presences, seeking embodiment through corruption and deception. They became the unseen architects of chaos, whispering temptation into human hearts, fueling violence, pride, and rebellion against divine order. Their war against the Creator continues, not through visible armies, but through invisible influence. Scripture reminds that the struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places. The same rebellion that began before the flood now manifests in every era through systems of corruption, false ideologies, and the distortion of truth. The world increasingly reflects the same pattern seen in the days of Noah. Knowledge expanding without wisdom, morality collapsing under indulgence, and humanity exalting itself as divine. The spirit that once gave rise to the Nephilim now works through those who deny any higher authority. Modern society celebrates self-worship, technology, and dominion over nature, unaware that these pursuits echo the desires of the Watchers. Power has shifted from physical might to intellectual supremacy, yet the same influence drives both. The hunger for control over creation, the urge to reshape life, alter consciousness, and redefine morality mirrors the rebellion that summoned judgment in ancient times. Giants no longer walk in flesh, but their arrogance walks in spirit through institutions and ideologies that exalt human intellect above divine truth. Occult movements and esoteric philosophies have revived ancient teachings once attributed to the Watchers. Practices once condemned as sorcery now appear disguised as enlightenment. Meditation rituals invoking celestial energy, symbols representing ancient gods, and doctrines promising hidden wisdom are modern reflections of the same forbidden knowledge that corrupted the first world. The return of the giants may not be measured in height, but in the magnitude of deception that has overtaken human thought. Unseen forces continue to manipulate leaders, nations, and cultures toward the same goal: the rejection of divine sovereignty. Prophecies across traditions foretell a resurgence of ancient powers in the final age, an unveiling of beings who will again walk among humanity. Many theologians interpret this not as a literal reappearance of physical giants, but as a return of the same spiritual forces embodied in human institutions and technological advancement. The boundary between science and sorcery grows thinner as humanity once again seeks to ascend without permission. Evidence of this spiritual infiltration appears in the glorification of violence, the normalization of immorality, and the erosion of sacred values. The world moves toward unity, yet that unity is rooted in defiance rather than truth. Just as in the days before the flood, humanity builds its modern tower, an empire of information, artificial intelligence, and self-deification. The more connected civilization becomes, the further it drifts from its spiritual source. The same rebellion that once brought divine wrath now hides beneath progress and innovation. Prophets throughout history warned that the ancient spirits would rise again, not as titans of stone and sinew, but as rulers of thought and culture. Their power would manifest through influence rather than intimidation, persuasion rather than strength. Music, media, and ideology would become tools of enchantment, reshaping hearts as the Watchers once reshaped minds. Humanity, unaware of the spiritual nature of this war, participates in its own deception. The Nephilim's legacy continues not in the bones buried beneath the earth, but in the philosophies that exalt rebellion over obedience. Despite the growing darkness, light persists for those who perceive the deeper conflict. Spiritual warfare requires discernment, awareness, and unwavering faith. Just as Noah remained pure amid corruption, individuals today are called to guard their minds and spirits against deception. The ancient powers that once sought to corrupt humanity's blood now seek to corrupt its faith. Their return is not a physical invasion, but a spiritual infiltration, one that only truth and divine guidance can withstand. What began as a story of giants and celestial rebellion has become the blueprint for every struggle between pride and humility, deception and revelation, chaos and order. The giants may have fallen long ago, yet their influence continues to rise through the hearts of those who seek power without purpose. The return of the Nephilim is not a prophecy of monsters. It is a warning about humanity's own capacity to become the very giants it fears when it forgets the Creator who once swept the world clean to begin again. From the beginning of recorded memory, fragments of truth have been scattered across cultures, scriptures, and ruins, waiting for the moment when eyes would again seek what lies beneath the veil of accepted history. The story of the Nephilim, dismissed by scholars and theologians alike, has never truly vanished. It lives in sacred texts, in ancient architecture, in mythologies that span continents, and within the deep yearning of humanity to understand its true origin. Every age has buried the evidence a little deeper, yet the earth itself still whispers of what once was. Across deserts, jungles, and forgotten temples, inscriptions tell of gods who walked with men, of knowledge descending from the sky, of beings who taught humanity both wisdom and war. Modern society looks upon these stories as mere symbols, yet their uniformity across distance and language reveals a hidden coherence. Myths that never met speak the same names, describe the same descent, and end with the same judgment. The evidence was never destroyed, only reframed, hidden behind allegory, so that only those with open hearts could perceive its meaning. Revelation does not require new discovery. It demands the courage to see what has always been before our eyes. Humanity has been surrounded by hints of its celestial encounter, encoded in the angles of the pyramids, the symmetry of sacred geometry, the constellations aligned with ancient monuments. Even within Scripture, truth waits quietly for those willing to read without fear. Genesis spoke plainly of divine beings mingling with mortals, yet generations of interpreters chose metaphor over reality. The truth became invisible not because it was absent, but because it was inconvenient. The silence surrounding the Nephilim story reveals more about humanity than about the giants themselves. It exposes fear, the fear of confronting realities that defy the boundaries of religion and science. Acknowledging that divine rebellion shaped history demands humility, and humility is rare in a world that worships intellect and progress. Yet the pursuit of truth cannot coexist with comfort. Every suppressed fragment of the Nephilim's tale challenges humanity to reconsider its place in creation, and to recognize that unseen forces continue to shape the destiny of the world. Each discovery, each uncovered scroll, each unexplained ruin brings humanity closer to realizing that the Nephilim narrative is not merely history, it is prophecy. The spiritual war that began before the flood continues still, veiled in modern forms. The same forces that once corrupted the world now work through technology, ideology, and culture, guiding humanity towards self-deification. Yet within that darkness lies opportunity to awaken, to remember, and to reclaim the truth that was buried beneath ages of denial. Truth has never been hidden beyond reach. It has been buried in plain sight, visible to those willing to look beyond the surface. Legends of gods and heroes, tales of lost civilizations, and the unrelenting human desire to ascend all point toward the same revelation, that creation has been intertwined with the divine from the beginning. Humanity was not abandoned after the flood. It was given a second chance, a call to rise without repeating the errors of those who sought power without purpose. When knowledge is pursued with humility rather than pride, it becomes illumination rather than corruption. The story of the Nephilim reminds that the boundary between heaven and earth, between spirit and flesh, remains fragile. Each generation must choose whether to honor that boundary or to break it once again. The giants may be gone, but their legacy endures wherever ambition eclipses reverence. The true revelation is not about their bones or their monuments, but about what they represent, the endless struggle between divine order and human defiance. What humanity calls myth may in fact be memory. The forgotten giants of old were not erased. Their shadow lingers in every culture, every mystery, every unanswered question that refuses to fade. To see them clearly is to see the truth about ourselves, a truth long avoided, yet always waiting. The evidence they did not want discussed is not only historical but spiritual, written not just in stone or scripture, but within the very soul of mankind. Those who seek will find that the story was never about giants alone, but about the divine image within humanity, capable of both greatness and corruption, redemption and fall. When the veil of denial lifts, the truth will no longer whisper, it will thunder. The return of understanding does not come through archaeology or science alone, but through awakening the spirit that has long been lulled by distraction. The forgotten giants remind that what was once lost can be found again, that knowledge need not corrupt if guided by wisdom, and that humanity's true calling has always been to walk in harmony with the Creator rather than to challenge His design. So as this message draws to a close, carry the awareness that the Nephilim's story is not a relic of the past. It is a mirror for the present. It calls for discernment, humility, and faith. It urges every soul to look beyond the noise of the world and seek the truth that has been waiting since the dawn of time. Those who listen with open hearts will hear the whisper of history calling them to remember what once was and to prepare for what may come again. If this journey into the hidden history of the Nephilim has moved you, remember that truth grows stronger when it is shared. Subscribe to this channel to stay connected to future explorations into mysteries that others refuse to discuss. Like this video to help its message reach more seekers who long for understanding. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, insights, or experiences. Your voice adds light to the conversation. And share this film with your family and friends so that together you may awaken curiosity, discernment, and faith in a world that too often forgets its divine origins.